Okay, welcome senior economics students. This is Mr. Heel, and today the video lecture is going to be on Chapter 5, Section 3 called Changes in Supply. And when you're done with this lecture, you should be able to have met the objective and be able to explain how factors such as technology, related prices, input prices, competition, and expectations help to create or make changes in supply. Again, not quantity supplied, but supply. In other words, we are going to effectively have some form of increase in supply, which means we're going to have a curve that shifts to the right, or a decrease in supply, which is a curve that's shifted to the left. Okay, so there are several shifters of supply or other things besides price which affect supply. Okay, and so what I'm going to talk about is just going to go through TRICE one item at a time, and hopefully it'll make a lot more sense to you, and then be prepared to bring in questions to class as we prepare ourselves to do homework in class as you're doing the actual lecture at home. This is called the flipped classroom. Okay, so the first item we're going to talk about is technology. It's technology, and really this is a technological improvement. Means more efficient. It means more efficient, okay, production. So it means more efficient production, okay, and lower costs. Anything that gets us more efficient production and lower costs. Now, one thing I want to note, that this does not mean just high tech. This does not just mean high tech. So any technology that allows a supplier or producer to have a more efficient production, so this is going to be production basically means, can I do more output with the same or less input? Okay, that's effectively a great way to think about being more efficient in production. And hence, maybe this, in fact, will lower cost. Okay, so I'm going to use a sort of a farming analogy throughout this presentation. So with technology, one of the examples I want to talk about a little, like, what if we genetically improved seeds? If we genetically improve seeds, and this will actually increase the supply of corn, so all of a sudden you have this technology used to improve the production of corn, the supply of corn. Okay, and so you're going to, by definition, have some technology, in this case genetically produced seeds, that will give us a larger yield, potentially, true, and maybe even a lower cost. So we can take cost out of farming. So genetically improved seeds, if it in fact ends up creating a situation where we have a increase in the supply of corn, then we have a situation where we may have the initial supply of corn looking something like that, but then what we have is a shift of the supply of corn to the right. So we have an increase in supply, and if you remember, there's price up here and there's quantity supplied down here. What you have effectively, and let's write it in yellow. If you start out with this particular price at this particular quantity supplied, now at the same price you have an increase in the quantity of corn in this case. So what I keep telling you in class is that a classic definition of a shift in supply, in this case a shift to the right, would be at any price you have an increase in the quantity supply. So at each price point here, these three price points, you have an increase in the quantity supplied. So therefore, in this case, you have a shift to the right, which basically says you're going to have an increase in supply, not an increase in quantity supplied. As you recall, the only thing that changes an increase in quantity supplied is, in fact, the price. Okay, let's talk about the next part of the acronym, or R, and that really stands for related prices, complements in production, or substitutes in production. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Please make sure you think about being a supplier when you talk about supply and shifting of supply curves. Put your supplier hat on. Okay? So, what does related prices, complements of production, or substitutes in production mean? Let's give you an example. If the price of a substitute production good rises, producers might shift production towards the higher priced good, causing a decrease in the supply of the original good. Okay, so again, if the price of a substitute production good rises, producers might shift production towards the higher priced good, causing a decrease in supply of the original. So in this case, let's say you have two 40-acre fields, and you have, let's just call it soybeans and corn. So you have like soybeans here, soybeans in this field, and then corn here. Well, what's going to happen if there's an increase in the price of soybeans? If there's an increase in the price of soybeans, this may cause a farmer to decrease the supply of corn. Okay, and again, it's over time, as we remember from elasticity. But in fact, if you look at it this way, this field right here, instead of doing corn next year, you could move soybeans into that, and you would in fact do less corn. So there would be, if you look at the model, then there would be a shift in the supply of corn to the left, because you would have the price changed for soybeans, and therefore you moved up the curve and you decreased the overall supply of corn. Okay, so that's one of the ways you can look at the price of related goods and services. Okay, how about input prices? Input resources or input prices. So this is a pretty straightforward. A rise in an input price will cause a decrease in supply or a leftward shift. A decrease in the input price will cause an increase in supply or rightward shift in the supply curve. Okay, so in our farming analogy, an increase in the price of fertilizer would cause a decrease in the supply of corn. Okay, an increase of the price of fertilizer, because what you need is fertilizer. Okay, so fertilizer is an input to making corn. Okay, so if this is going up in price, would we all agree that corn is going to cost more to produce? Okay, and if it costs more to produce, all right, you're going to have a company that's going to have a decrease in profit. Okay, and to such that they may consider getting out of the corn business altogether. But certainly, what they will do is they'll start to move the supply curve for corn from S1 to S2. This is a shift to the left, because in this case, the input price for fertilizer, a major input for corn, went up. And of course, if fertilizer prices come back down, then we're in great shape. You would want to actually look at shifting the curve to the right. Okay, the fourth part of TRICE is C for competition. Okay, now we're dealing with the number of producers. Call in demand that we had market size, which was the number of consumers. Now we're dealing here with something simple. Are the number of producers increasing? Generally speaking, the larger number of sellers or producers, the greater the supply. So if you have a situation where there are more and more farmers, let's see, what are they going to switch to? Let's say they switch to corn because of genetically improved seeds. Not only that going to help, but you have an increase in the number of suppliers. So you have an increase in suppliers. So net at any price, you will have an increase in the supply of corn. So again, number of producers simply says there are more out there making a good or service, and therefore by definition you would expect at any price you're going to have an increase in supply. Okay, and then finally, expectations. Okay, and this primarily deals with price expectations. So we talk a little bit about kind of what that means. So if the future price of anything, so this deals with price, so if the future price, if you expect future prices of, let's say, corn, all right, to rise, so expectations of higher corn prices in the future, let's just call it next month. So next month, you have expected, for a lot of different reasons, and let's just not worry about what they are, but you do expect corn prices to rise next month. This month, you're going to keep corn in the silo. You're going to keep your corn in the silo, or certainly in some form of storage. Okay? You will wait. And then by definition, if you are in fact going to wait, you have a situation where the supply of corn will shift, at least in the short run here, to the left. Okay? Because you're expecting future prices to change, in this case, increase. So this may cause farmers to decrease the supply to the market today. So again, expectations about the future price of a product can cause producers to increase or, in fact, decrease current supply. So folks, that is TRICE, technology, related prices to complements in production or substitutes in production, input prices, competition, i.e. the number of producers, or expectations about current or future prices. Will, in fact, all of these will shift the curve. It'll shift it to the right, which is an increase in supply, or shift it to the left, which is a decrease in supply. Looking forward to seeing you and talking about this in class tomorrow. Bye now.